It has been some time. I am sorry for that, for one, but we are back for another episode in the Buffy and Books series that I had started last year, and we've taken a really long break. Technically, I had already filmed all the rest of the episodes for the rest of season 1. However, I was very unhappy with the quality of that video because of technology. So we're gonna redo it, but that's okay. That's another reason why it has been taking me so long. So I really hope that you like this. If you are new to this series, please go ahead and catch up on the series. There's an introduction video that just kind of briefly explains the purpose, what I'm doing here, and me just gushing about how much I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and how much the show has meant to me over the years. And then the subsequent video after that is season 1, episodes 1 through 4, and just talking about each episode a little bit, a summary, and some themes that I really am sticking to, and books that kind of fit those themes. We're beginning this video with season 1, episode 5. Never kill a boy on the first date. In this episode, Buffy tries to start dating this boy, Owen. Owen is a bit of a brooder. He loves books. He comes into the library looking for an Emily Dickinson book. So apparently he's the heartthrob of the episode, and Buffy tries to date him. However, Buffy's extracurricular activities of slaying vampires gets in the way of her dating life.
All right, well, I'll just jump in my time machine, go back to the 12th century and ask the vampires to postpone their ancient prophecy for a few days while you take in dinner and a show.
She finally manages to go on a date with Owen, but it gets rudely interrupted by an incident that's happening at the funeral home. So she tries to separate from her date, leaving Owen at the Bronze, and she promises that she will be right back. Little does she know that Owen decided to follow her and the Scoobies to the funeral home. The date goes so horribly wrong that she knows that there is just no chance of another date. Until Owen explains that he is tired of sitting home every night with his nose stuck in a book, and he ended up finding that hanging out with Buffy leads to this exciting life. Buffy has to choose to do the right thing, and she knows that letting Owen tag along would only wind up with him being eaten by a vampire. So she decides to deny Owen future dates and taking him on thrill-seeking date adventures. This is the one thing about this episode that drives me insane, because at first she's really kind of ate up about it, and I'm just so irritated with Owen, because I'm like, this display of him wanting to hang out with her because she's his ticket to a good time has nothing to do with how much of an awesome person Buffy is in and of herself. And I don't know why I'm stuck on that little piece of this that I just really never liked. And of course, that's not exactly the point of the episode. It's more on the fact that it's just another layer, another thing on the list of everything that she has to sacrifice for her duties and keeping peace on Earth, you know? While this episode has never really been a favorite of mine, now that I'm going back and really analyzing each episode and each conversation that Buffy has and how those relationships are developing throughout the shows, this is another great example at the very end when Giles and Buffy have a really good heart-to-heart, and Giles gives her an example of a time when he's had to sacrifice something that he really wanted for his duty as well. And I think that while it doesn't fix the problem and it doesn't really take it away, at least it's another one of those things that really work towards just showing how Giles and Buffy's life are so connected and so alike in so many ways. As we've talked about in other episodes, when Buffy and Giles first meet, they are so opposite. Many seasons down the road, we are going to run into some of Giles' journal. Again, I really like how, this show goes on for 7 seasons, which is equivalent to like 7 years. And in that time, how close Buffy and Giles become. And it's one of my favorite things about this whole show as a whole. So it's just another little kernel towards that goal. Okay, so for the book for this episode, I'm gonna go with a book that, I apologize, it has been a really long time since I've read this book. And to be honest, it's not one of my favorite books, but it actually matches this episode so perfectly well. It is called The Queen's Assassin by Melissa de la Cruz, which is the first in a series. I think it's just a duology. I know there's at least one other book after this, which I have not read. But in The Queen's Assassin, it's about this guy who is the Queen's assassin. He works for the Queen as her personal assassin. And he's on this mission for, you know, a job. And he runs across this girl. And they're not like fast friends or anything like that. I don't think they don't actually get along very well. And they kind of have a fun little relationship, actually. They decide to end up teaming up together because they're headed the same direction, I think. But we learn that she is not exactly who she says she is. And she's trying to hide her identity. She's running away from her duties. She's hiding out. And this guy does not know, has no clue who she really is. But she is just dead set on wanting to just be a normal girl and go on adventures and stuff like that. But they get into some trouble, and we come up to this crossroads where, how does her false identity kind of compromise him and get in the way of his duty and his life? In that respect, this book really fits this episode very well. Episode number 6 is The Pack. In this episode, the Sunnydale High School gets to go to the zoo for a field trip, but this group of high school kids who are kind of cliquey, kind of bullies, go into this forbidden area of the zoo where they have these new animals that they just shipped in from Africa, but they're not ready to be shown to the public. But these kids kind of sneak in and trying to bully some kid, and Xander's like, it's okay, I got this. So he follows them in there. When they get back to the school, Xander starts acting kind of funny, kind of weird. Well, it turns out they are possessed by hyenas. There's this whole weird thing about hyena possession, and Xander and these bullies all get possessed by these hyena spirit energy thing. And therefore they kind of start acting like hyenas, and they start having this whole pack mentality. But it just keeps getting worse and worse as time goes on. They get more and more aggressive and more animalistic. There's this one scene that I would like to point out because it kind of is the first time we really acknowledge this kind of love triangle thing going on between Xander, Buffy, and Willow. See, Willow has always had a major crush on Xander. They grew up together since they were like little. But Xander's always kind of friend-zoned Willow. But now Buffy has come into the picture, and Xander is always got this thing for Buffy. But Buffy has completely friend-zoned Xander. And Willow, I think at first was a little bit wary of how Xander really likes Buffy, but she also realizes Buffy will never have anything to do with Xander. So this is kind of the first kind of like, we're going to confront this issue. And Xander, in his new hyena brain, attempts like a sexual assault on Buffy. Okay, I'm running low on battery, so I might have to continue this on in a little bit. But this was kind of the first confrontation of this dynamic, and as the show goes on, we see this kind of thing be confronted several other times, and there's just a lot of different layers with this dynamic that gets slowly uncovered, and it changes them. Like Willow starts to kind of realize time after time, Xander is never going to see her the way she wants him to see her. You know, as many deep feelings go, these things don't just change overnight. They don't just happen because one or two incidences. Excellent characterization. I realized while editing, I forgot to mention one of the funniest moments in this episode. As we know, whenever something bad happens, they run to Giles and they're like, we need to look stuff up. Something terrible has happened. And so Giles is like, okay, what's happened? And Buffy starts listing off all of the things that are different about Xander. No, I could not find a good clip to share. There was one clip that had just this most obnoxious music behind it, so I could not play it. The cat's behind me. Anyway, so Buffy has explained all the like different behavior patterns of Xander, and she goes, it's bad, isn't it? And he's like, oh, it's dreadful. He's turned into a 16-year-old boy. And then as he's walking away, he's like, well, you'll have to kill him, of course. Anyways, the book for this episode is Nightshade by Andrea Kramer. The first book in a young adult series about werewolves. I have not read the rest of the series, and it has been a really long time since I've read Nightshade. This book is essentially a forbidden romance between a werewolf and a human. The werewolf female is actually betrothed to an alpha male in their pack, but she starts to have feelings for this human. But mostly this is the book pick for this episode because of the pack mentality that this book exhibits. I feel like is especially strong in this book. I also like that there's other fantasy books that have werewolves in them, but they're not as deeply explored as they are in a book that's completely all about werewolves. So in this one, you really get to see that pack mentality. You get to see how they click together and how they keep the human, like the humans are humans and we are us and we are superior. And they are forced to like commingle with the humans at the school, but through every aspect of their life, it's very much like us versus them. They can also be very cliquey, bully, kind of vicious, actually. I do remember that sticking out. So I felt that this book was very suitable for this. Okay, we are into episode 7, Angel. In this episode, Angel saves Buffy from these vampire warriors, and they resort to hiding out at Buffy's house and kind of like hiding him out from her mom. Her mom comes home and she kind of sneaks him up into her room, and she's like, I don't want you to go out there because, you know, those guys are really dangerous. So then she goes off and does her thing and then comes back, and he has to stay there because sunlight and all that good stuff. So anyways, the next day she discovers who Angel really is. So as a vampire slayer, she kind of has this intuition of, she can sense a vampire, but she can't really sense it with Angel because of his curse. This is also where a vampire from Angel's past comes in and tries to set him up and make him look like he has hurt her mom. And this puts Buffy to the test to kind of decide what to do. She's a vampire slayer. He is a vampire, but she has feelings for him. So how is she supposed to cope with that? And then she also has to start asking herself, can vampires be good? Because there has been a lot, ever since she's met him, he's been doing nothing but like helping her and saving her life. And then they kind of have this face off, and she ends up learning about the curse. And I kind of think, the more that I think about this too, I kind of think that this actually has a lot of symbolism and kind of parallel meanings in real relationships too, when you have feelings for people, when sometimes they have a darker side to them. It's just all so good. So good. I'm wondering if you could potentially guess the perfect book for this episode. The book for this episode is Twilight, obviously. There's the obvious superficial reasons of human girl, vampire boy, but on a deeper level, Edward actually really struggles with his nature, right from wrong, his true feelings, and who may become collateral damage because of who he is. While it doesn't seem like Angel really struggles with a lot of these emotions, Buffy actually does. She has to sit there and think, okay, if he's a vampire and I let him into my life, what if he does something bad and kills my friends or my family? I think that's really cool. By the way, I am convinced that Stephenie Meyer got so much of her inspiration for Twilight from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The last episode for this part of the episode is episode 8, I, Robot, You, Jane. In this episode, the library is going digital. Willow and the computer club are scanning the physical books into the computer system. Willow also begins talking to this guy on the computer. Things start to go really wrong at the school. For instance, the nurse's office, some kids' medicine is getting mixed up. A kid with allergies is getting seizure medication or whatever. And it seems like with all these little things, the common denominator is everything connected to the computer network system. So it turns out that Willow accidentally scanned a book that was housing a demon. A demon was stuck in this book and she scanned it into the computer, and now it has possessed the computer and the network system. Because of how he can talk to other students, he can figure out how to get them to expand his range. I really love this episode because in its time, these were very real issues about the use of computers, and a lot of these questions were questions that would come up, like if some hacker on the internet send a nuclear weapon, like all kinds of things like that. So when I was growing up, we had those really big box computers that took up an entire desk space, and they had like 4 components to create a computer, and then we had floppy bit disks. Even at my grandma's house, we had the ones that were like this huge box and this tiny little screen behind a ton of glass. We had the dial-up AOL internet and AOL Instant Messenger. It was also the beginning for me as well, trying to navigate the dangers of talking to strangers on the internet. I was actually 15 years old when we got our first computer with internet.
Just not knowing what he's really like.
Or who he really is. I mean, sure, he says he's a high school student, but I can say I'm a high school student.
You are.
Okay, but I can also say I'm an elderly Dutch woman. Get me? I mean, who's to say I'm not, if I'm on the elderly Dutch chat room?
I get your point. I get your point. This guy could be anybody. I mean, he could be weird or old or crazy or a circus freak. He's probably a circus freak.
Right, and I mean, we read about this all the time. People meet on the net, they get together, talk, have dinner, a show, horrible axe murder.
Hello.
So this one's a pretty nostalgic episode for me. The book for this episode is Illuminae. This book is basically a space opera. It deals with these communities in space. They live on these spaceships, and there's this supercomputer, Aiden, who's actually been shut down because I guess they felt that he was just a little too overpowered. But one thing leads to another. There is like a zombie-like virus outbreak on their ship, and there's an enemy spaceship that might be attacking them. So they make the decision to turn Aiden back on to help them out of this mess. He's learned a few things, and he's quite resentful of being shut down. Episode 9 is the puppet show. And in this episode, Sunnydale High is putting on a talent show. Also, we meet the new principal, Mr. Snyder. The old principal actually got eaten by the pack of hyenas. So that's a thing I forgot to mention. But I really like how we have like a follow-up even a couple episodes later about, hey, by the way, because of what happened in that episode, you know? So anyways, the new principal, Mr. Snyder, is demanding that Mr. Giles supervise this talent show, and also recruited these Scoobies to be in the talent show. Buffy discovers that there is an organ thief in the show somewhere, so it turns into this whole mystery, trying to discover who this person is who's murdering students, and she has to track them down before the show can go on. So the book for this is kind of silly and kind of simple, and Goosebumps, Night of the Living Dummy, simply because one of our characters is a ventriloquist and has this creepy dummy. And that's where I'm going to end this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed this. And part 3 will cover episodes 9 through 12. And hopefully it will not be an eternity before I get that episode out. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.